it starts to close in the form to be too much of a shape if the line is too heavy. And I think there's a few places in here where I went around the outside edge a little too strong, and it's just reading more like an outline. I don't want it to read quite so strong. All right, good enough. Just a little bit in a few places. All right, let's zoom back out here and take a look. So that's looking good. I like that. Oh, I was noticing earlier too when I kind of opened this up again was that the hat has a little bit of this curve at the top, and I think I either need to commit to that curve or back off a little bit on it. So I think for me, what I want to do is I want to add to the curve. So I'm going to come back to the drawing here. And I'm going to pick up that gray. I'm going to add a little bit more of a gradual curve to the top. It's right up here at the top. I don't know if you're seeing what I'm doing up here, but it's just a little bit to kind of make that look a little more rounded. I felt like it had this funny kind of bend to it, and I wanted it to feel a little more smooth as it goes up and over the top there. Also thinking it's a little dark on my line here. So I think I'm going to sample a little different gray. Let's go with a lighter gray. Okay, let's try this again. Now I'll do a little bit away with these lines up here, just little details. There we go. All right, dropping back in with my values, 20, 35, 50, 70. How are we looking? Ooh, okay, so obviously I need to fill in some gray there. And it looks like I need to fill in a little 35 up there as well. So I'm putting a little bit of that gray up there. Let's go 50. Needs a little bit of that as well. And maybe looks like a little bit of my 70 got in there, so all right. So let's go back to where we were here. So looks like my background, I've got some potential backgrounds blurring of stuff that I have going on that I originally started kind of airbrushing in, if you will, blocking in some of those light kind of cloudy gray back there. But I think I may have to end up redoing that, because I think, you know, in taking out some of this other stuff that I have, I don't know if that's going to work anymore. go. Fixing some of these sort of mist that we had added back in here. There we go. So essentially, I'm working on a layer behind the image, and I'm kind of softening a little bit of these edges with this kind of atmospheric fog kind of stuff that's happening back here. And so you're probably, I don't know if you're seeing it very much because it's happening on a really subtle level, but like up here around this house, boom, I just kind of lightly dusting it. Ooh, looks like I got a little bit on that 20% here. Cleaning up these edges. Oh, down here by the hands. Not sure if you're noticing this. Here we go. So I want to soften some of this. This is, again, if I turned this layer off, you would just be seeing background, essentially. It's part of the drawing layer here, and I ended up moving my drawing around a little bit, and so you're seeing an area where the drawing is separated, and so some of the areas around the initial drawing were erased out, but it's not going to matter because I'm essentially painting over that background area of the line drawing now. So it's okay. It's not really affecting anything at this point. But by painting out these little areas here, I'm softening the edges. Oop. Got to make sure I'm on the right layer here. There we go. I want it to be here. There we go. So as you can see, I'm just softening these edges. A little bit up there. These were just part of the drawing where it was cut away, but I didn't take it up to the edge. A little bit back here in the hair. Boom. Okay. Pretty good. Eventually, I will take my key away here as well that's on each of my separated layers. All right. So let's see. Anything else? Don't think so. So 35, 50, 70. And I was talking about multiple light sources here last time. So 1 and 2. These essentially are where I'm picturing light that is affecting this figure coming from the two different sides. 1 is more like a rim light, and 2 is more like a soft light coming from above. So, you know, if I were going to do this in color down the road, I'd probably use temperature to separate 1 and 2, with, you know, maybe the warmer light coming from 1 and the cooler light coming from 2. I picture him as being Scrooge is outside here. He's walking down the streets of London and working his way back home probably. He sees you in the street and, you know, he gives you a dirty look like, don't bother me, you know, bah humbug, kind of a deal. But it's outside, and I'm figuring it's winter in this story, right? So probably cooler, wintry light, and probably early evening. It may even be dark outside, so But this other side, the light source from one, I picture as being kind of a rim light, but with that warmth of like almost like a firelight, like that glow. And to me, I think of that glow could represent a couple things. It could be, a fireplace, right? Which is giving off like a light that's burning in the room. It could be a candle, the flame. It could be ghostly. But I picture one side being warmer, one side being kind of cooler. And we're not going to see that too much in the grayscale here. If I decide to take this further and do more with color with it, I'd probably experiment a little bit with that. Maybe I'd do that down the road, but for now, for this one, it's more about the values. So what I do know is that the middle of the picture here is really where the core shadows are running down the middle. That's like the divide, right? The one side of the face of the other. And the whole story, even the most basic way the narrative is being described through the way that you're showing the character. It's not a full illustration, showing events and actions and things happening, but there's a duality to Scrooge, right? There's a duality to Christmas Carol. There is that, the story of the man that was and the man that becomes after the night's events, right? And there's a transition in him. So I would want to convey this duality in this person. He's crusted and old and doesn't, have any more love in his heart anymore. And he's, become curmudgeoned and just a bitter old person. But he wasn't always that way, and he doesn't end up being that way in the end. So there's definitely this transition. And so to me, having even the most simplest way of showing this character in a simple little portrait, that is what you're demonstrating here, is the nature of how his character shifts or transitions. So for me, I definitely have to bring in the core shadow so that I get enough light, bright light, coming on both sides of him. Now, degrees of rendering, degrees of how far am I going to take this from being just a drawing to being a full painted illustration. We're not going to do that here. I'm going to leave a lot of the drawing still there. I'm establishing some basic values, and then at another time maybe I'll come back in and take it farther. Not sure I would do that on a stream. It might take a lot longer to do on a stream, and it might not be that exciting, to be honest. So I think for now, I'm going to leave some drawing, but establish the core values, and that will be enough. That will be enough. All right. A little bit of water, a little bit of coffee. Hopefully you're all doing well out there. All right. So now I think for a while I'm going to lay off the rendering still of the character, and I'm going to move a little bit more into background, because before I can really get into any more rendering on the figure itself, I have to establish what is the lighting and what is the environment. And right now, most of what I have done has been all just straight out of imagination, not considering the environment at all, but just bringing out the forms and the anatomy through line, through a bit of shading. But now it's time to commit. But before I can commit, in order to make him work with an environment and an overall feeling of the picture, I have to establish the lighting. And that means the environment and lighting behind him. So his silhouette is really strong right now. Why? Because it's pretty light behind him, and he's a dark character wearing dark clothing. So I need to make him drift a little more into the environment that is around him before I can kind of finish his rendering up. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to work on this background a little bit. So let's see. I had another background here earlier where I was darkening things in. I don't know where did I get that? I'm not even sure I remember where I got this. Maybe I just doubled my shading. It looks very close to the shading that I had existing. So maybe it's just like another layer of it. I don't know. Maybe. All right. Well, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab whatever this is. I'm going to sample whatever the gray is because I don't think I pulled it from my key. And it's pretty light. Still going pretty soft. I'm going to use my airbrush here. There we go. And darkening this edge, and again, this is on the layer behind the art, behind the drawing, because I separated that. I am able to just paint freely so that I can get a nice clean edge. Okay. I'm going to go a little larger here. There we go. Turning off my arrows for a second so I can get a little more of the effect. Okay. Not bad. So there's a little bit of shadowiness, a little bit of light kind of. Some of this is coming through in the drawing, which is fine. And helping out the drawing just a little bit by darkening it. Overall, the effect works pretty good. These kind of feel like rays of light coming from a window. All right. This is helping. This is helping. Do I need to go another layer? Maybe I'd call this background. We'll call this background 40. And then let's do another layer. We'll call this background. You're not seeing my layer, so don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. All right. So I'm on yet another layer of background, and I'm using multiply. So, of course, every time I add a layer and continue, it's going to get darker and darker, as you just saw right there. But I think it could use just a little bit more darkness. Not sure I like the way that's looking. Is it too dark? That's the question. That is the question. So let's go really big here for a second just to see. It seems like we're benefiting from some darkness over here for sure. Does it need more behind the hat? All right, a little bit. A little bit. Definitely starting to separate that face from the background a little bit more. I got a little funky. By the way, I've backed away from the art so small because I'm needing to see the overall effect of the values on the picture. So that's really what I'm after, and I can't do that if I'm too close. So this is one of the advantages of working digitally, I suppose, is that you can back away from things as you need to. There's a little area right here which is not quite... I don't want too small of a brush because you'll see it will cease to become atmospheric and it will become more a stroke, which is fine, but I'm actually creating something that resembles mist. So too much brushwork in there and it's not going to read as mist. And I'm not working in a style where the whole piece is super choppy or, super painterly. So I need to stay within a certain degree of smoothness to create atmosphere on an already realistic looking figure here. So I'm just trying to darken this in, but it looks like I'm not sure what's going on here, but I've got there's a strange not exactly sure what's happening here. Aha, maybe this is what I needed. Aha, there we go. I was getting kind of an uneven patch over there. Okay, now we do 40. That's looking pretty good. And then we add the 60. There we go. All right. That's looking pretty good. I don't want any of the background light to be brighter than the light that is in the foreground on the subject, right? The light on the subject is actually the thing that needs to pop and separate it from the background. So in this case, I think some of this area, I know it's hard to see with my cursor being so small. But some of this area here on the side of the face needs to transition to the light. Like there's a dark band here and a lighter area in between. So I need to get in here and do a little bit of, nope. So let's see. I'm going to sample a little bit of this gray. Okay. Let's see how that looks. It's pretty good. Okay, that's pretty good. 60, let's go to the 40. You know, it's one of these when you're doing this mist, it can be so kind of drive you nuts because you're really you're kind of focusing in on something that is probably way more focused than you need to be. All right, there we go. All right, this is helping. This is helping already, actually. You can start to see now that the effect of the lighting of the background is merging now with the character. I'm almost wondering if I need a little something in the foreground here. He's close to us, but wouldn't it be kind of cool if there was some sort of fog in front of his shoulder? You think that would work? I don't know. Let me know. Let me know what you think. I'm going to try and throw a layer over here in the foreground, in front of the drawing, in front of the 70%. That would be an opaque gray, probably like that. What do you think? Rather than just having his jacket go straight off the edge here, what if I had like some fog? Very ghostly. Kind of like that. That's a little sneaky, isn't it? It's like he's emerging a little bit out of that fog. Interesting. What about at the top? Same thing at the same thing happening up here? Would the hat be drifting into the fog as well? I'm just building up the opaqueness up top. Is it too much? I think a little bit works. Definitely softens that a little bit. I like that. That's good. Keeps it, kind of narrows us in a little bit on the face. All right. Back to my 20, dealing with the background, and I think this corner is getting pretty neglected up here, so I think I'm going to grab a little bit of this gray and transition it out a little bit. And maybe a little bit of this gray down here. Okay. Yeah, I like this. This is good. I think we need a little more of the 60 in here. Just doing backgrounds now. I like that. I like that. This is good. This is good. All right. Doing good. Doing good. Now, um, so I can begin to feel the finishes here, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my grayscale key up here that I have on each of my layers. And I'm going to put them on their own layer so that I can turn them off. Right now they're connected to the art, I think, right? Yeah. So let's do this. I'm going to turn off my background so that I can. I'm going to call that fog, my fog layer. And then 70. Okay. Well, let's do this. I'm going to take all of them as a selection. And I'm going to copy the 70 and paste it. Then I'm going to copy the getting rid of the 50, pasting that onto its own layer. The 35. And then the 20. So I can get to these values if I need them. I'll have them. I could save them in my palettes too. Okay. Now I can kind of see how things are looking. So let's go back here. And let's turn off those layers. All right. I can tell that on my 60, I need a little bit more dark value up here. All right. All right, so things are looking good. There's my fog back on. Okay. How we doing here? We making it through? All right. Now I've got some sense. I can definitely tell that the 20% could be darker and maybe the 35% could be a lot darker. Like this layer needs more. So I kind of think all of it could be more. So what would happen if I doubled my layer here? And then doubled this layer? No. I'll take my 20. And I'm going to come back in on my 20% copy layer. And switch tool. So I am taking 20% as a multiply layer, an additional 20%. So I'm going on top of my 20%, and it's multiplying with the 20 that's underneath it. So it's kind of darkening it a little bit. Mostly because I want to kind of soften some of this. Just overall bring the whole thing down. It's got too much light on it. Again, let's not get too close. I'm knocking down some of the light here. If you can see what's happening, let's see if I can go in a little closer. Figured some of his sideburn hair is probably getting gray. He's getting older. It's getting up there a little bit. So some of that might be approaching white. I'm also kind of darkening the skin so that I get a little bit of a specular happening on the side of the face here. Knock back the ear. There might be a little bit of light on the ear. Just darkening this whole thing. Back of the neck. So, yeah, definitely knocking that back. Okay, let's go to, and again, we doubled the 30 layer and it was too much. So I won't do that, but I am going to add another layer above the 35. And maybe I sample my 35. You might be wondering, like, why am I turning everything off there? It's because I'm actually sampling the value in my key. And when you take a sample, an eyedropper off the screen, it's reading everything that's turned on. So if you want to keep your values true to what they are, then you have to, which is why it would probably be easier to put them in the palettes, but you have to pull it without everything else on to get the purest value, which is why palettes would really be the smartest way to do it. But you know, it's just as fast for me to quickly turn everything off. Okay, so I've got my 35 now, and I'm coming onto this new layer, and I want to start darkening. And I'm working in a multiply fashion. There we go. So it's getting a little bit darker in here. Going to go a little bit bigger. But this is the kind of thing you can't get too close because you need some to stay objective about it. So I'm adding some darkness here in certain places, a little bit underneath the hair, a little bit underneath the hat. I'm focusing that light like along that ridge of the face there. Emphasizing a little bit in here. Is it too dark? Could be. Could be. Maybe a little too much. But there's a few places where I know the form needs to begin to round a little bit, get a little more dimension to it. So I'm going to go ahead and safely. But now that I know that that's where the light's coming from, I can feel a little safer about dedicating myself to those shadows. A little bit more under the neck. Now I'm thinking more about that light now that's coming from the lower side. And I'm actually feeling pretty good about the light that's coming up in the reflected light that's coming up on the opposite side. I'm feeling pretty solid about that. It's already falling into position quite nicely. So now this is just really about hitting those areas that I want to bring out these little bits of form. All those little planes of the face that are turning. So I'm kind of getting in here, and this is where my understanding of that anatomy, the zygomatic bone, the orbitals, and I'm looking at all that anatomy and the wrinkles and what I know is there, and that little bit of light that's landing on there is describing those forms as they're turning in space. So I'm really, I'm ad-libbing it here. I am just throwing down shadows as I respond to the shape and respond to the form that I want to be there. This is why we study anatomy, right? I teach a class actually on facial expressions and anatomy, and this is exactly why we do this. Is because when you get into these areas where you're trying to figure out, well, what does the form do there? Where do I need to shade? How do I make that look right? It comes from studying the anatomy and having a good sense of that form that's underneath, so that you know where the light is landing. And that's all it is. It's study, it's knowledge, it's practicing and applying it to what you're doing. And I can't always explain perfectly why I make each little tiny decision, except that it's coming from the knowledge of what's going on there in the anatomy. That's all I can say. That's really where it's coming from. Now I'm also applying a little bit over here to the scarf and the jacket, because some of these areas need a little bit of darkness too. But this is good. His face is getting darker. The rendering, the tones are getting a little more substantial. And it's starting to merge. The layers are blending a little bit together. And it's looking a little more like lifelike, but with a little bit of choppiness from that drawing, the looseness of the values I'm adding, it's all coming through a little bit in style too, and that's good. That's okay. What else did I want to do here? So I'm going to add one more layer above my 50% now, and remember this is the 50%, right? And I want to sample and do a little bit of darkness on this layer too. And I think I need to go a little darker than what I have here. It will be another multiply layer, which is what I'm doing. I need to sample my 50%, right? And there it is. Quickly sample. Again, palettes would probably be very effective here. But yeah, for the moment, not doing that. Okay. While we're at it, doing a quick little save. Always good to do save in case you're lugging down here. Maybe your space is making your operating system run a little slower. That way you have various stages of saving that you can go back in on. All right. I think this is gonna come to a close quicker than we think. Because now that I've got that background established, now that I've got some of these values working a little bit better on this face, I think we're going to be done here. I think we're going to be done real soon. All right, so continuing to add some darker values in here. Okay, maybe you can see what I just did there. I'm going a little darker, but it's also hitting pretty hard. So you can adjust this a couple ways. I could adjust the flow of the brush that I'm using. I don't like to adjust flow or opacity too much because if you have too many, and I think I've talked about this before in Stream Bear, but if you have too many adjustments that you're making, then every time you go back or want to make a change to that specific area the way that you did it before, then you have to save the custom brush and go back to that exact setting. And it's a lot of settings. Try not to adjust the settings as much. If I had to give one tip about, digital painting and working digitally, if you're painting this way, don't customize everything too much that you can't get it back. Or use more generalized tools and can't do the same thing because everything has to be this customized brush. I mean, truly, making good images really only needs about 3 values. The magic number 3, right? 3 is the magic number. 3 values, 3 brushes, 3 brush sizes, 3 colors. Like, you don't need to have all of that variety at your disposal. It can be nice to have if you're messing around or just, needing something super quick and fun. But if you're working on anything that requires coming back in and back in and back in, it can just be murderous to try to get back to where you were with that exact brush and that exact setting. I really recommend keep it simple. Keep it simple. And somebody once told me it's keep it simple, stupid. Not calling anybody stupid, just telling yourself, keep it simple. So, I don't know that I like that I'm hitting this hard with this dark value there in the cheek. I feel a little uncomfortable with how hard that's hitting. So how could we do this? Because I need the darkness to be there, but I don't want it to be so intense. It could be the brush shape. I'm using a very hard-edged brush, which is defining it very carefully with some edge to it. I could use a softer brush. So one of the easy things I could do is just come up and pick a softer brush. Maybe I should do that. Maybe let's try this for a second. Let me try a softer brush. I'm just picking the uniform softer brush. I will bump it up to be a little bit larger. And then try it that way. Yeah, see, there you go. Now I'm getting a little bit of a softer edge. And I want softer edge, right? But I'm not doing anything where I can quickly get this brush back because it's one of the default brushes and it's right there. Or my own custom brush if I had it. But I don't, I just want to get painting. Honestly, I just want to get to the rendering. I don't want to have to customize everything so much. Okay, so softening. That's too dark. I didn't like that. I'm just softening some of these real dark areas. A little bit under the neck down here, the effect of the neck and the beard. Now, using this softer brush is going to allow those blends to happen more naturally instead of being choppy. Choppy can be characteristic, choppy can be good, but I'm in the finishing touches where I really want things to start happening on a more gradual base and not big steps. Okay. Pretty good. All right, light's coming from up there. Maybe a little softer on these fingers. These fingers are pretty hard. I was trying to make these fingers feel a little bit like they're claw-like. And it's supposed to be holding his cane, but I'm realizing that the cane is starting to feel unreadable. So I think, before I come back in on the face a whole lot more, I want to do a little bit more work on the cane just to make it more readable. I think it needs a few places where the light just needs to look like it's reflecting a little bit differently. So, check some stream here, see how things are going. Again, the chat's open if you want to jump in there and have something that you'd like to talk about. That's totally fine with me. All right. A couple little more things to the face. I'm going to come back down to my 20% copy. Grab some of this extra 35%. Just softening those edges a little bit. Light's going to catch a little bit on the edge there. Again, you do some values and then other values get easier to see. Sometimes it's not so easy to see right away, but you do a few and then you do a few more, and then it begins to you see it a little bit more. Like a little bit more in there. That white sort of frosty lamb chops there on the side are probably going to be the brightest part. I think all these other parts are going to be. Okay, pretty good. How you guys doing out there? Everybody doing good? Hope you're having a good evening. Feel free to jump in the chat if you have any questions. Welcome on. My name is Trey Gallaher, and this is my stream. I'm usually out here Saturdays, Sundays, a little more on the weekend. Enjoy some extracurricular drawing and lessons. Okay, let's go now to this layer. These are, again, the little ads that I was throwing down. And I can tell that there's some little areas that I want to darken a little bit more. Making that eye, look how nice and brooding that eye got right there, right? By darkening some of the shadows around that eye, it suddenly is popping out a lot more, which is good. A little fleshy on the nose. That's good. A little fleshy on the neck. And you can see that as those values merge and blend, that things are getting a little bit more soft and blendy in there. Your eye is not noticing the choppiness of it, right? It's getting smoother. Now, I don't want to airbrush it to death, you know. It can always kind of turn things off. I don't know if I like that or not. Maybe that's hitting too hard. But this is one of the great things about layering, right? Is you can always kind of dial it back to a certain degree. Let's leave that alone a little bit for a while now. And let's come down to the hand that we were working on. Down below a little bit. Down here on the lower left. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to turn off my fog and see what I can do to make this hand work a little bit better. I kind of think, I feel a little bit like maybe it's a little too dark. Is he wearing a glove? You know, is that his skin? If that's his skin, that is very dark skin. Especially since you were kind of conveying the skin on his face is so much lighter than his hand, right? So core shadows is one thing, but it's also another thing if they're just too dark. What's the 50 look like? Is the 50 where the darkness is coming in? Is it the 35? Where is that? 35 definitely is making things a little bit darker. 52. All right, let's come into the 50 a bit. And let's erase out a little bit on the 50. Just on the hand. Just to see if we can bring back in some light. Because it is just getting a little too... It's not even flesh tone anymore. And we need some light, especially now that we know there's going to be light coming from below. We need a little more light on these fingers. Now, you could also, dive back in here and do like an opaque layer, like a highlight, and just paint it that way instead of, worrying about any of going back and erasing. But I think if the more I know before I start painting the speculars on there about what it needs to look like, the better off I feel like I'm going to be. So in other words, the more I can see it before I get to painting those speculars, then my speculars are going to make more sense. I think we need some light here on the cane. A little more light on the cane there. Give me 1 second. All right, let's come back in on the... Ooh, definitely some darkness there. So let's lighten up some of the 70. We also know there's going to be some light now on the edge of that jacket down below. So that could be hitting a little bit of light there too. All right, let's do a little bit of the 20. Again, I'm just backing off on some of the heavy shading that I did on the hand originally before I knew the light. What was going on with the light there. And I can tell already that just by softening some of these shadows that the skin tone is able to come back out and it's getting a little bit closer to what I had on his face. it's weird, rendering values is tricky because they indicate form, but values are also part of the base local, what we would call the local values, or what the values are of the actual object, regardless of the lighting. And sometimes if you go too dark, the values of your shadows don't match the local. And, there are probably rules about that, about, what is the default should you be thinking about in terms of how dark is your values of your shadows versus the values of your locals. And if you're working digitally, this is all multiplying in layers, right? So it's compounding and it's working together, and as you turn layers on and off, different effects happen. So it's not easy, but you just have to be careful that the shading doesn't overpower the value of the local too, because that local value tells us what the color or the grayscale is of the object. And if you just shade shadow without thinking about the local, your shadows overpower the local, and then it loses its color or it loses its value. And in this case, like, my shadows were starting to feel heavier than the actual object is, its local value. So it's already getting a little better by softening and lightening some of these core shadows that I had already started to put in here. I think I just got a little too heavy in certain places. So that hand's already feeling better. Liking that. And again, I've kept all my values separate, so it's just a matter of going into each of those values and taking a little bit out. Or I could just flatten it, but I like to hold on to my layers as long as I can. Okay. All right, now, good enough on the hand, I think, for now. So now I'm going to go back in on this cane and see if I can figure out, what's happening there. So, I don't know, down here in the corner, I've got the edge of the hand and the cane right adjacent to it. And I've got the values on the hand, which are catching some of the light that we're talking about. And then I've got the cane, which is catching a lot more light. So I need to make sure that the way the light is hitting the cane doesn't feel like the same light that is hitting the hand. Whew. So let's do a little bit of erasing here on the cane to see where some of this light, there's part of it. So that helps. I'm also realizing maybe some of this cane's line work might be a little heavy too. This is all part of the hand going behind there. And again, got to come back and check from a distance. Okay, I think we need a little bit of a highlight in the drawing. So let me see something for a second. Going back to my drawing level here. Okay. I'm going to paint back in on my drawing layer. Or maybe just above my drawing layer. So I can always preserve that drawing layer if I need to. I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight of the cane itself. Okay. Back in with the values. Okay. How's this looking from a distance? All right, back down to this additional layer of highlight on the cane. I think I'm going to need to do the same thing on the other side. This is the other side of the cane to separate it from the background. Little reflected lights, because the material is probably some sort of hard surface material. And I don't want all these shadows to blend, so I'm just adding custom little lights. Okay. Overall, definitely I can see the cane a little bit better. But the light on this round part of the cane is really weird. It's not following the same contour as what I have down here in the drawing of the cane. It is a round object, but the way you shade it describes the surface. So I need to go back in there and hit a little bit of these lights in here. And that looks like that's being done on the shading layer. So back down here, let's turn on the 50. Gonna grab my 50 and I'm gonna paint a little bit of these curves out. And then I'm gonna go to my 70, grab my 70. I like that. It feels a little bit better. Let's see it from a distance. All right. Fog back on. There we go. Better. Better. All right. Fingers are picking up off the surface of that a little bit more. Looks like maybe I need a little bit on the hand down here. So let's go to the 35. Grabbing a little bit of the 35 there. Just want to knock the hand back a little bit so that I get just a little bit more specular on little reflected light on that cane. All right. You know, I could finesse and nitpick to death, but at some point I want to put a pin in this one. So I think I'm just about done enough. Until such time as I decide to do more. Let's take a look with the color again. Ooh, yeah. Liking that. I think the light on the hat's a little strong. You know, I'm realizing now I might be able to do a little bit more with the reflected light as well. So let's do this. Just softening a little bit of these edges. A little bit of these edges here and there. Little bits, little bits. Up here in the hat, up top, I'm finding... I want to chop this down a little bit. It's a little too hot. And let's go to the 50. Just softening a little bit of those edges, softening a little bit of those edges. I need to take out a little bit of this. Little few of these edges were just too loose sketching. What is that thing in there? Is that on the 50? Is that on the 70? Ooh, that's on the 70. That's... So you can see right here, as I turn on my 70 there, I've got this really wild ass line here. Excuse me. This wild line. That's a little bit much. I need to break that up a little bit. So I'm going to come in here and just knock it back a little bit. I don't know how that line crossed so much of a line. But I was just probably getting a little carried away. Okay. Let's back up. Grab my 70. It's funny, now that I have all these more values, I'm realizing maybe I don't like the warm paper as much as I thought. Or maybe I could divide it in half, right? Maybe half the paper could be warm, half could be cool. Let's see here. I'm still knocking back my 70. Okay. Okay. Just softening a few areas of value right now. Too much. Again, I'm up here on the top of the hat. Just softening. All right. Looking pretty good. I got one line in here that I keep. Now I'm noticing little things. So 70. Right around the nose here, I've got a little bit of this line that keeps jumping out at me a little too strong. So I need to get rid of that. What layer are we on there? 50. It looks like it's the 50. Just backing off a little bit here. Right there. It's just a line that connected and it starts to draw too much attention. All right. Okay. Okay, I'm staring at it too much. I think that's a sign. I think we're just about ready to call this one. Thank you for hanging in there with me. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of this, fun bringing out Scrooge. One of my favorite characters of all time. I think just to kind of have fun with the colors, I'm beginning to think maybe I should do something really quick to kind of give the effect. I'm going to duplicate my color layer. And what I'm going to do, okay, well, first of all, let's make an extra copy so that I have lots to play around with. turn off my original. And you can't see any of this. Sorry, I realize it's not very exciting down here if you can't see my layers. But I am going to take this layer and adjust the color. Like, what would it look like if we did a different color? So let's do a hue saturation change. And let's move it a little more. Ooh, blue, green is loving that. All right, so we'll do that. And we have both layers on. Okay, first of all, yes. Both layers are on, but you can't see the other one, but the orange one's underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase with a big soft tool this half of the face. So in other words, this half of it stays in the warm. Well, isn't this fun? So this half stays in the warm because it's getting the light from the fire that we talked about. And then the other half is still catching the blue, right? That's fun, right? That's kind of cool. So that gives us a little bit of a different temperature play. Do you think the fog needs to go darker now? Where's my little fog layer I had up here? There it is. Does the fog need to take on more? Do I double the thickness of the fog? Does it become more transparent? Does the fog become darker? Is it too snowy? Well, let's do this. I took a copy of it, right? So I have it there, but maybe I need to just darken it. Let's go, I could add color to it too, but for the moment, let's stay kind of this whitish gray. So let's go levels. And let's try to add a little bit of, let's see what happens when a little more. It's there, but it's not so hot and white. It's better. It's better. It's kind of eerie. Ooh, it's sneaky. Let's do that. I like that. That's good. So the fog's there, but it's not too snowy. But I'm also... I guess that's okay. That's okay. That's okay for this, I think. All right. What else? What else? What else? What else? What else? How about a little bit of a specular on his eye? Because I am definitely feeling like the eye could use a little bit of lightness in there. It's hot, right? It's wet, so it's going to catch. So let's get in there a little bit. Let's put those little speculars in the eyes. I know, we all love to do this part, right? So what if it's just like a little bit of... And then the same thing up on this side. So the light catches in the eye a little bit over here.